Wait, who's that? Nothing takes you out of a movie or TV show like a recast role. Sometimes they're just necessary, and sometimes the reasons are almost too weird to believe.
Some of the most familiar faces in Westeros have changed a lot during the course of Game of Thrones' run on HBO. Over the course of the series, several of the show's key actors have ended up being replaced, leading fans to wonder just what really happened. Throughout the entire series, Emilia Clarke has shined as Daenerys Targaryen. From a mild young bride to the fierce and ruthless warrior she is today, Daenerys has been through one of the show's most exciting arcs. And without Clarke's portrayal, far fewer viewers would have fallen in love with the character the way that they have. Hailed as a feminist icon, fans have been gripped by Daenerys' finest moments, and Clarke herself has achieved international recognition for the role, as well as nominations for several awards.
I'm not going to stop the wheel. I'm going to break the wheel.
With that in mind, it might seem difficult to believe that anyone else ever could have played Daenerys, but in the initially troubled pilot for Game of Thrones, Daenerys was originally played by Tamsin Merchant, best known for her role as Henry VIII's fifth wife Catherine Howard on The Tudors. Creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss have been open about their disdain for the original pilot, but neither the two showrunners nor casting director Nina Gold have fully discussed the reason for Merchant's exit. Today, fans are left to wonder just how different the series might have been with a different Daenerys riding those dragons. Game of Thrones' third season introduced a new potential love interest for Daenerys in the form of Daario Naharis, played by Ed Skrein. This clever, long-haired mercenary was obviously interested in Daenerys from day one, and when he betrayed his own men to join her side, it became clear that Daario's machinations would make him an even bigger player in the seasons to come. After a 3-episode arc in the third season, however, Skrein was unceremoniously replaced by Mikhail Hausman. As it turned out, Skrein had run into a scheduling issue, as he was set to appear in the new Transporter film. The actor has since admitted that it wasn't the easiest decision, but that he had no regrets in leaving Game of Thrones. Luckily for Hausman, he quickly became yet another one of the show's beloved key players. In the early seasons of Game of Thrones, viewers discovered that Cersei Lannister's 3 children, all of whom were supposedly of Baratheon blood, were actually bastards born of her incestuous affair with her twin brother, Jaime. However, nobody paid much attention to any of the children besides Joffrey, Cersei's eldest and most wicked child, who eventually ascended to the throne and wreaked a significant amount of havoc on King's Landing and Westeros as a whole. As a result, the other 2 supposed Baratheon children were often shunted to the side, making it easy for them to be recast as required, a frequent reality when dealing with young actors whose growth easily put them out of sync with the show's pacing. Because of these age issues, Tommen Baratheon was recast in the show's 4th season, and when it was time for him to take the crown from Joffrey, Calum Wary was replaced by Dean Charles Chapman. Chapman went on to handle many of the Mild King Tommen's more difficult scenes, including a love scene with his new wife, Marjorie Tyrell, as well as his death at the end of the 6th season. However, many fans might have recognized Chapman's face from somewhere, since he had actually appeared in the show's 3rd season, playing a young Lannister squire who was held hostage by the Starks and eventually killed by Rickard Karstark. This actually gives Chapman a rare distinction of having played 2 separate roles during the show's run, and having died twice, too. Much like Tommen, Cersei Lannister's middle child, Myrcella, went largely overlooked until later seasons of Thrones. Myrcella was essentially left out of the plot entirely until the 2nd season, when her uncle Tyrion decided to send her to Dorne, creating a permanent rift between Tyrion and Cersei. In the 5th season, she reappeared as a love-struck teenager engaged to Trystane Martell, the young prince of Dorne. Thanks to an ongoing battle between the Lannister and Martell families, she ended up murdered at the hands of Ellaria Sand shortly after she discovered her true parentage. Though Myrcella was played by the young actress Amy Richardson during her appearances in the early seasons, when she returned, she was played by the dynamic Nell Tiger Free. Much like Tommen's strategic recasting, this can likely be chalked up to discrepancies between the growth of the actor and her character. As the older of the much-feared Clegane brothers, the Mountain is one of Westeros' most terrifying warriors. Once a formidable fighter known for his penchant for committing war crimes on behalf of the Lannisters, the Mountain was nearly felled by a poisoned spear tip during his duel with Oberyn Martell in Season 4. After that, however, he was turned into a kind of mute zombie, loyal only to Cersei herself. But that wasn't the only transformation that the Mountain has undergone during Game of Thrones' run, as he's actually been played by no fewer than 3 separate actors. In Season 1, when the Mountain nearly killed Loras Tyrell after a joust, he was played by Conan Stevens, an Australian actor. The Mountain was far less visible in Season 2, but when he did appear, he was played by the Welsh actor Ian White. From the 4th season on, the fearsome and intimidating Icelandic strongman Hafthor Ulis Bjornsson has portrayed the Mountain. Of course, now that he's ensconced in an iron mask, it doesn't seem to matter much that this massive man has changed faces 3 times. The Tarly family isn't exactly the most important clan in Westeros, but astute viewers will have gotten to know them pretty well over the years. By far the most significant member of the family is Samwell Tarly, the lovable bookworm of the Night's Watch and frequent companion to Jon Snow. Sam has proven to be the heart and soul of the show time and time again, but he's not so popular among his own family. In the 6th season, when Sam arrived at Horn Hill with his girlfriend, Gilly, he received a cold welcome from his stern father, Randall, who clearly favors Sam's handsome and accomplished brother, Dickon.
Not fat enough already.
During Season 6, Freddie Stroma of Harry Potter fame appeared as Dickon. However, scheduling issues forced him out of the show, so Black Sails' Tom Hopper stepped in. To plenty of acclaim from fans. Sadly, Hopper's time as Dickon has also been cut short, as both he and his father Randall were burned alive by Daenerys when they refused to bend the knee to her in Season 7. Easy come, easy go. Most viewers of the show will be familiar with Stannis Baratheon, who, as King Robert Baratheon's brother, staunchly believed he was the rightful heir to the Iron Throne, but some might not remember his wife, Selys Baratheon. While Stannis fought for the throne with the aid of Melisandre, Selys remained nothing if not loyal. After all, she stuck by her husband through several unsuccessful battles, as well as his obvious attraction to Melisandre herself. When Stannis used their daughter, Shireen, as a human sacrifice, Selys finally took her own life, only for Stannis to meet his final defeat in battle a few hours later. Selys, when she was introduced, was a very minor character who can be spotted simply standing in the vicinity of Melisandre and Stannis while the latter commits himself to the Lord of Light during a magical ceremony in the 2nd season's premiere. At that time, she was played by Sarah McKeever, had no lines at all, and served as little more than a glorified extra. However, when Selys' role was expanded to include a multi-episode arc, the show chose a more venerated actress for the role, Tara Fitzgerald, who famously appeared opposite Ralph Fiennes in Hamlet on Broadway during the mid-1990s. Game of Thrones' first episode ended on a pretty shocking final scene. Specifically, the young Bran Stark being pushed out of a tall tower after catching Jaime and Cersei in a compromising position. Bran survived the fall, however, losing his mobility and eventually gaining a new set of powers, including the ability to review and even meddle in events of the very distant past, making him the heir apparent to the role of the Three-Eyed Raven. When the audience finally met the mysterious Three-Eyed Raven in Season 4, he looked fairly different to the character fans would later come to know. Originally played by Struan Roger, Bran first meets the Raven while the omniscient being is holed up in a secluded tree. By the time the Three-Eyed Raven returned to the show in its 6th season, Roger had been replaced by legendary actor Max von Sydow, best known for The Exorcist and Flash Gordon. Since then, it has been von Sydow's Raven who has guided Bran through the secrets of the past, present, and future of Westeros. Game of Thrones is rife with villains and antagonists, but few are more sinister or more mysterious than the Night King, the ancient and seemingly infallible leader of the White Walkers. The Walkers, who reside far north of a wall that separates Westeros from the northern wilderness, were previously considered nothing more than a frightening legend, but have recently made their presence known in Westeros in a pretty spectacular way. Throughout the show's run, audiences have watched the Night King perform a range of despicable acts, from turning a child's sacrifice into a White Walker to taking down one of Daenerys' beloved dragons. Though the character comes to life via impressive prosthetic makeup, as the show went on, sharp-eyed viewers realized that the Night King looked a little different from when we first met him. Before Season 6, the Night King was played by Richard Blake, but the role then went to Vladimir Furdik, an actor hailing from Slovakia. Though the show's creators have never provided a concrete reason for the change, it's possible that Furdik won the role thanks to his history as a stuntman, giving him more mobility for battle scenes. Throughout Thrones' run, Beric Dondarrion has quite literally lived several lives. In Season 1, he served as nothing more than a member of a search party sent by Ned Stark to bring the Mountain to justice. As war broke out in Westeros, however, he joined a group called the Brotherhood Without Banners, who, through their loyalty to the Lord of Light, have followed Beric as he is constantly revived from the dead by his resident Red Priest, Thoros of Myr. Most recently, Beric has been found aiding Jon Snow in his fight against the White Walkers, traveling north of the Wall in order to get more information on these mysterious and ancient creatures. David Michael Scott portrayed Beric for his minor role during the first season. Beginning in Season 3, however, Irish actor Richard Dormer took the reins. Luckily, Barrick's change in appearance is easy enough to explain in-universe, considering the man died multiple times off-screen before viewers met him for the second time again.
Anyone who gets to play Spider-Man is living a dream come true. Unfortunately for Andrew Garfield, that dream was brief. Why was his tenure as Peter Parker so short? The answer, as always, is complicated. The best characters often come from actors with a concrete vision, who can turn stories, experiences, and research into a coherent whole. Garfield believed in the power of this process as fervently as a 25-year-old rookie actor could. After the series cancellation, he told The Guardian about the work he'd put in behind the scenes to do right by the character. "I thought, if I can infuse all this ancient knowledge and wisdom into Spider-Man, it could be profoundly affecting for young people in the audience. That was always my intention and what I tried to do. Unfortunately, the studio didn't agree. The cutting of character-centric scenes, the promotion of Garfield as a celebrity, and the ultimate reality of The Amazing Spider-Man as a blockbuster series made Garfield's highbrow ideas unsustainable. He has at least made peace with this rift, telling The Guardian in the same interview, "What I'll proudly say is that I didn't compromise who I was only ever myself." Andrew Garfield is an actor's actor, and that means he was never going to be satisfied working entirely in superhero blockbusters. Ever since Tom Holland took up the webbed suit to flip and quip his way through the MCU's sprawling saga, Garfield has devoted himself almost entirely to cerebral art house cinema. 2016 saw him take part in Martin Scorsese's Silence, in which he played a 17th century Jesuit priest. In 2017, he played a polio survivor in the biopic Breathe. Most recently, he starred in Under the Silver Lake, a neo-noir that takes his character across Los Angeles in pursuit of conspiracy. If the end of Spider-Man pushed Garfield into this kind of work, it's as much a blessing as it is a curse, and perhaps Garfield himself feels the same way. Peter Parker is a consummate nerd. In his debut in Amazing Fantasy number 15, he's bitten by a radioactive spider because he's visiting a lab after school. Peter Parker just loves science so dearly that he likes to spend his time discussing the finer points of atomic energy. Christianed Midtown High's only professional wallflower on the very first panel he ever appeared in, he's a geek before he ever gets the power to climb walls and swing across New York. Sure, the Amazing Spider-Man movies inform us of Peter's nerdery, but what we actually see looks very different. Of the three actors who make up Spidey's big screen presence, Garfield is the one whose handsome looks weren't toned down at all. Garfield's Peter Parker skateboards and broods with a charisma that's entirely too cool. Maguire's Spidey loved to talk chemistry, and Holland's gets together with his best friend Ned to build Lego models of the Death Star. But you can't really picture Garfield's Spider-Man doing much in the geek arena beyond maybe playing the occasional round of Mortal Kombat. He's just too cool. And when it comes to Spider-Man, that's a fatal flaw. The MCU debuted in 2008 with the explosive arrival of Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark and Iron Man. By 2012, Marvel Studios had pulled its team together in The Avengers, a blockbuster event that would usher in what we might just one day call the Marvel Age of movies. And oh yeah, Spider-Man was there too. Of course, with Sony holding the movie rights to the character, he remained trapped in his own cinematic universe. Though Amazing Spider-Man did well at the box office, the fact remained that it was completely eclipsed by the other Marvel-based movie to come out that year. Plus, the MCU is demonstrating far more staying power than Sony's Spider flicks. In retrospect, the writing was very much on the wall. People were loving Marvel's sunny, quip-laden vision of their own universe far more than Sony's slick take on the iconic web-slinger. As the years went on, Marvel built up more and more gravity, and Spider-Man, the company's flagship comic book hero, was pulled in and revamped by Tom Holland. There was an inevitability to this process not even the best movie could have thwarted, and unfortunately, Garfield's films were far from the best. Director Sam Raimi's spin on Spider-Man feels like ancient history now, but try not to let the memories of Tobey Maguire dancing in the jazz club cloud your mind just yet. Instead, remember Alfred Molino's trailblazing performance as a villain at war with himself. Remember Willem Dafoe's lunatic glee at being able to bombard Spider-Man with pumpkin-themed bombs.
Are you in or are you out?
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
Remember Kirsten Dunst's warm-hearted girl next door. Remember the upside-down kiss. And perhaps above all, remember that iconic train rescue. At the time, the world loved those movies. Only 5 years separate the last of the Maguire trilogy from the first of the Garfield duo. In some ways, that's a long time, but it's not long enough for a generation to turn over. Most kids who grew up with Maguire were barely into adulthood by the time Garfield rolled around. Maguire remained an A-list star rather than an elder statesman passing down a beloved role. It was too soon for anyone to erase the mark left by the first trilogy from their minds. Too soon for there to be an organic desire for a new take on an old favorite. And in the end, that's the desire a superhero flick lives and dies by.
More than a decade before Universal's attempted Dark Universe and its Tom Cruise-led Mummy reboot, their original efforts at bringing the classic monster back to the big screen were certified hits. The Mummy trilogy, which kicked off in 1999 and concluded with 2008's critically panned The Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, killed it at the box office, raking in a collective $1.25 billion worldwide. A major reason for the success of the first two Mummy films was the solid cast, which helped revitalize the action-adventure genre by infusing it with both horror and comedy. They took what could have been a set of campy period films and made them appeal to a younger audience through witty dialogue and thrilling action. Most generally tout Brendan Fraser as Rick O'Connell as the centerpiece of the Mummy universe. But rising star Rachel Weisz's work as Evelyn Evie O'Connell proved just as integral. Weisz's performance in The Mummy turned out to be her big break. She signed on to do The Mummy Returns without question, but she's mysteriously absent from Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, in which Maria Bello played Evie instead. The reason for Weisz's departure from the project was actually laid to rest nearly 12 years ago, but hasn't necessarily become common knowledge. When talks of a third film in the Mummy continuity began to pick up steam back in 2007, so did discussions about why Rachel Weisz wasn't attached to the project. One common rumor ran rampant about her distaste for the script, which she reportedly felt went against Evie's character. Another was started by director Rob Cohen, who believed it had something to do with Rick and Evie's 27-year-old son, Alex, whose inclusion would require Weisz to be aged up for the third movie. Weisz put the whole debacle to bed during an interview back in 2008, when she explained that she never got the chance to even look at the script. She'd also just finished on Rian Johnson's The Brothers Bloom, and was about to begin work on another film immediately, so she wouldn't have a moment to spare. Couple that with her and Darren Aronofsky's newborn son waiting for her at home, there was no time for a trip to China for 5 months. Tomb of the Dragon Emperor was a critical flop and prompted Universal to rethink their plans for a follow-up based around the Aztecs. Little did Weisz know back then that she couldn't have pulled out of the series at a better time.
Hey, Mom. Sorry I blamed you guys for raising the Emperor.
To say The Mummy: Tomb of the Dragon Emperor suffered without Weisz would be an understatement. The film is the lowest rated of the trilogy, with an abysmal 12% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Moviegoers didn't find it charming either, as its audience score was only slightly better at 30%. In the audience comments on the aggregator site, many franchise fans noted that the film took a hit with Weisz's absence. One viewer wrote, "Ultimately, the absence of Rachel Weisz and the change in location and mythology are the biggest flaws in this film. Weisz was a major part of the first two films, and by having her replaced by Maria Bello, the original character is lost and replaced with one that doesn't meet Weisz's performance. Swapping out actors at the end of a trilogy is a huge risk. We wonder if it might have been better to leave out Evie entirely to not frustrate and confuse the franchise's fans. While Weisz wasn't in the film, there was a nice homage to her."
Is the Scarlett O'Keefe character really based on you?
Honestly, I can say she's a completely different person.
Bello praised the moment in an interview with Collider, saying, "It was a great comment on it. I liked the idea that I wrote novels and the woman I wrote was this amazing, beautiful Rachel Weisz ingenue, and she was the character because she's so perfect. And then there's me in my mansion, bored to death." Following the release of Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, Bello was on board for another Mummy film, but Universal canceled the project in 2012. The Tom Cruise Mummy reboot in 2017 flopped hard, killing the planned Dark Universe. So who knows what's in store for the franchise? It just might come back to life.
Not every Harry Potter star made it through all 8 movies. A few of them were switched out for a wide range of reasons, including death, run-ins with the law, and embarrassing scandals. Here are some of the major Harry Potter characters who were ultimately recast between films, and the stories of how those transfigurations came to be. Although there's still plenty of Potter fans who prefer Richard Harris's depiction of Dumbledore, the role was nonetheless recast ahead of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban after the 2-time Oscar winner passed away in 2002 from Hodgkin's disease. Harris had expected that he might not be able to carry on in the role forever, which he first took to please his granddaughter. He told the press that, "I'll keep doing it as long as I enjoy it, my health holds out, and they still want me, but the chances of all 3 of those factors remaining constant are pretty slim." The part would eventually go to Michael Gambon, who starred in all 6 following films. But Gambon wasn't the only British star invited to don the heaping wig and decadent cloaks. Years after the fact, Sir Ian McKellen revealed that he too had a shot at becoming Albus Dumbledore, but turned it down.
I couldn't. I couldn't take over the part from an actor who I'd known didn't approve of me.
Harris had reportedly been unimpressed with McKellen's career, implying that he was a passionless actor. Despite all this, McKellen added that he sometimes saw himself on posters which featured Gambon as Dumbledore. When Lord Voldemort first appeared on screen in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, there wasn't a lot for the actor portraying him to do. After all, he was mostly hidden behind Professor Quirrell's turban throughout the story. And even when he did emerge, his face was superimposed on the back of Quirrell's skull. Richard Brimmer did what he could with the role, but wasn't surprised when he wasn't invited back to reprise his part in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Brimmer told This Is Northeast, "The producers spent a long time fighting to get me, so I'm very proud to have been the first. But the role is now being played by Ralph Fiennes, who's an old mate, in the 4th film. I've been in the business a long time, and it didn't surprise me that they went for a bigger name, being Hollywood-led, and I'm happy to pass it on to Rafe." Fiennes was already an A-lister by the time Sorcerer's Stone was released, having won Oscar nominations for Schindler's List and The English Patient, so it's no surprise that the filmmakers didn't seek him out for that brief CGI appearance. Jamie Waylett did an apt enough job as Draco Malfoy's pastry-loving henchman Vincent Crabbe. Like many of his contemporaries in the series, the young actor was completely new to the world of film when he suited up as the Slytherin sycophant, but was gradually given more and more screen time throughout his 6-film tenure. By the time Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows arrived, however, Crabbe's other half, Gregory Goyle, was seen standing next to a new Malfoy lieutenant, Blaise Zabini. Crabbe was completely out of the picture, and while the role itself wasn't recast, the character was shuffled out of sight to make room for Zabini. This all stemmed from Waylett's off-camera run-ins with the law. Waylett was arrested in 2009 after he was caught growing marijuana plants in his mother's home. That incident alone was enough to lose him his prime position in the Potter world, and the troubles would only continue from there. The actor was later arrested again in 2012 for participating in a riot, and this time he faced jail. Waylett's co-star Jesse Cave would later publicly rise to his defense, but the damage was still done, and the actor hasn't worked on a film since. When the Gryffindor common room portrait known as the Fat Lady first appeared in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, it was celebrated actress Elizabeth Spriggs who portrayed her. However, Spriggs' portrayal was brief and rather rigid in blithely asking for the prefect's password. So before the character would return in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the actress was replaced with Dawn French. French brought a more comedic element to the character as she desperately tries to impress the Hogwarts student body with her glass-breaking operatic skills.
Just with my voice.
French earned the role after her Harry Potter spoof for charity caught the attention of director and producer Christopher Columbus. Columbus told the BBC, "I think she's incredibly funny, and her Harry Potter spoof for comic relief was pretty amazing." The casting of the Harry Potter films was entirely limited to British thespians, a rule so strict it even forced producers to turn down Robin Williams for the role of Hagrid. But Vern Troyer became the rare exception when he was cast as Gringotts banker Griphook in Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Troyer was the only American actor with a major role in the film, but the character was voiced by his English co-star Warwick Davis, who also portrayed Professor Flitwick and another bank teller in the film. But by the time Griphook became more significant to the story in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Davis had taken over the role completely.
Griphook has so much more depth to him that I've ever been able to get into my work as Professor Flitwick, and so I went in and read for David Yates.
Though it was never reported as the reason for Troyer's replacement, the actor had been caught up in a number of embarrassing scandals following the first film's release.
Sometimes the actors who play the bad guys we love to hate have to pass the role to someone else. Maybe it's because of behind-the-scenes drama, or perhaps it's because of busy schedules. Here are the real reasons these supervillain actors were replaced. Frank Gorshin played the quizzing villain, the Riddler, in the 60s Batman series.
Riddle me this, crime fighter! What room can no one enter?
Gorshin's masked trickster remained one of the most well-loved villains of the series, and even Mark Hamill named him as one of his influences for his work on the Joker.
His Riddler is like one of my favorite comic book villains of all time. I love Frank Gorshin.
Yet, in Batman's second season, Gorshin inexplicably disappeared for 2 episodes and was replaced by John Astin, who's best known as Gomez Addams from The Addams Family. They were Astin's only appearances as the brain-teasing bad guy, and Gorshin eventually returned to the role. There are different stories about why the brief hiccup in casting happened. Gorshin's version was that he had a nightclub appearance commitment he couldn't get out of that conflicted with the shooting schedule. But Batman producer William Dozier claimed that Gorshin's talent agency demanded more money for the actor's appearances on the show than its budget could bear. 2 of Marvel's most vicious rivals are Wolverine and Victor Creed, aka Sabretooth. Fans got a tiny piece of that rivalry on the big screen in 2000's X-Men, when retired professional wrestler Tyler Mane played Sabretooth as part of Magneto's Brotherhood. He doesn't say much, but he gets a couple of good throwdowns with Hugh Jackman's Logan. But when it was time to give Logan his first solo flick with 2009's X-Men Origins, Wolverine, Mane was nowhere to be seen. Instead, it was Liev Schreiber playing the Savage Mutant. Speaking to The Hollywood Reporter in 2017, Mane said he didn't get to play Sabretooth in the prequel because the filmmakers wanted someone who looked more like Jackman. The wrestler explained, "The storyline was them rising as brothers, and Liev and Hugh look a lot closer in that respect, so I understand. I can't say I wasn't disappointed." Hugo Weaving played the villainous Red Skull in 2011's Captain America, the first Avenger, but when the character surprised audiences 7 years later by showing up in Avengers Infinity War, there was another actor under all the prosthetics.
In order to take the stone, you must lose that which you love.
While the accent and the voice may have sounded right, it was actually a skilled impression by Walking Dead actor Ross Marquand, not Weaving. Weaving's decision to sit this one out was hardly surprising, since the actor told Collider in 2012 that he had no intention of reprising the Marvel role. While acknowledging that he'd signed a multi-picture contract with Marvel, he said he didn't think Marvel would try to force the matter if he said no. But it turns out that Weaving may have been willing to return if Marvel had honored the terms of his contract. He told Time Out in 2020 that Marvel had tried to negotiate a lower rate for Infinity War and its sequel, Avengers Endgame, than was promised in his original contract. As a result, Weaving bowed out, opening the door for Marquand. The first actress to play Batman's feline antagonist, Catwoman, in the 60s TV series was Julie Newmar, who actually returned to the role in 2 recent animated features, 2016's Batman, Return of the Caped Crusaders, and the following year's Batman vs. Two-Face. Unfortunately, when it came time to film the 1966 Batman movie with the cast of the TV show, Newmar was shooting the soon-to-be-abandoned comedy Monsieur Lecoq. She was replaced for the film by Lee Merriweather, although Newmar continued playing the character on the show. For Batman's 3rd and final season, Newmar left the series to make the western McKenna's Gold, and actress and singer Eartha Kitt took up the role of Gotham's top cat burglar. Because Kitt was African American, it was deemed too controversial at the time for her and Batman to keep teasing each other, so their romantic connection, unfortunately, disappeared. While he never got any acid thrown on him, fans were guessing that a turn as Two-Face might eventually be in the cards for Billy D. Williams when he played Harvey Dent in 1989's Batman. In that film, Dent had just become Gotham City's new district attorney and hadn't yet suffered the catastrophic injury that would prompt his shift from Batman ally to supervillain.
For your dying pleasure, we are serving the very same acid that made us the men we are today.
However, at the 2017 Wizard World Nashville Comic-Con, Williams told fans that his chance to play Two-Face ended when director Joel Schumacher took the reins from Tim Burton on Batman Forever. Williams explained, "I had hoped that I would have done Two-Face, but it changed hands before then, and I think Schumacher got involved, so they took a different direction with that." However, Williams did eventually get to play Two-Face in a different format. In 2017, he voiced the iconic villain in the Lego Batman movie. The mid-credits scene of 2012's The Avengers briefly introduced movie audiences to Thanos, but it wasn't until Avengers Infinity War that the villain finally became the focus of the main story. The Thanos we met in the Avengers mid-credits scene isn't the same guy who plays the Mad Titan in the rest of the Infinity Saga. True Blood actor Damien Portier played Thanos at the end of the Avengers, but there was no drama behind the decision to replace him in the MCU. Avengers director Joss Whedon admitted he really wasn't sure exactly what to do with Thanos after the Avengers, implying there was no real long-term plan when Portier was cast. By the time the characters came around again in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy, Marvel had a clearer idea of Thanos' trajectory in the MCU, and Josh Brolin was cast in the role. As Marvel Studios president Kevin Feige put it, Brolin could be Thanos without any effects. He has that kind of face and that kind of gravitas.
I am inevitable.
In 2009, the video game Batman: Arkham Asylum was released and quickly earned the reputation as one of the best superhero video games ever. One of the game's highlights was the return of voice actors from the popular Batman: The Animated Series television show, most notably Kevin Conroy as Batman and Mark Hamill as the Joker.
Look at all this new security. How's a guy supposed to break out of here?
Conroy and Hamill would lend their voices to follow-ups like Arkham City, Arkham Knight, and Arkham VR, but both were missing from the 2013 prequel game Batman: Arkham Origins. Instead of Hamill, the Clown Prince of Crime was voiced by Troy Baker. An official reason has never been offered for Hamill's absence from Arkham Origins, but we know a couple of likely contributing factors. First, while he would eventually do Joker's voice again for other games, as well as the 2016 animated adaptation Batman: The Killing Joke, Hamill told IGN in 2012 he had no intention of ever voicing the Joker again. Second, unlike the first two Arkham games, which were developed by Rocksteady, Arkham Origins was developed by WB Montreal, which reportedly couldn't spare as big of a budget.
Penny is one of the most important characters on The Big Bang Theory, but she almost came out entirely different. Played by the flight attendant star Kaylee Cuoco, Penny provides more than just entertainment value in the sitcom. For one, she helps Sheldon and Leonard develop their social skills and ultimately live fuller lives. Of course, there's also a fun appeal to the juxtaposition of Penny's character, an aspiring actress and Cheesecake Factory server, in comparison to her academic neighbors. However, that wasn't always the case. During an appearance on Dinners on Me with Jesse Tyler Ferguson, Jim Parsons discussed changes made to the original Big Bang Theory pilot, and one of them would have made Penny a totally unviable character. As he said on the podcast, they didn't get the character that Kaylee ultimately played right the first time. Penny's character went through numerous rewrites during the pilot episode. Originally, when she first met Sheldon and Leonard, she was a savvy, street-smart manipulator rather than the kind-hearted girl from the Midwest fans are used to. As Parsons elaborated on Dinners on Me, it was done in a much more vicious way. Like in the original pilot, Leonard and Sheldon come across her crying on the corner, boyfriend's dumped her or whatever, and like she kind of lassos in, kind of puts one over on us in order to have a place to stay. From the sounds of it, there wasn't a believable, heartfelt connection between the three main characters, which is ultimately what makes the show work. The show was also supposed to be set on the East Coast, which wouldn't have made sense for Penny as she moved from Nebraska to California to become an actor. Chuck Lorre and Bill Prady may have created The Big Bang Theory, but Kaley Cuoco deserves a lot of credit for shaping Penny into the character so many fans have come to know and love. As Prady told Entertainment Weekly, in the first pilot, the female character is kind of rough. She's dangerous in a way and wasn't very nice to the guys.
Okay, you guys can buy me dinner, but that's the end of it.
The end of what?
And the test audience who watched that first pilot was not impressed with the original Penny. In fact, they allegedly hated her. The street-smart East Coast version of Penny was actually called Katie, and she was played by a completely different actor. Amanda Walsh, who later ended up working as a writer on Schitt's Creek, had the job of bringing Katie to life, but ultimately, her version of the character just didn't work. Walsh was happy, however, that the show moved in a completely different direction from what had been set out in the pilot script. As she said in The Big Bang Theory, the definitive inside story of the epic series, the fact that it wasn't immediately picked up and there was such retooling made it an easier pill to swallow. While it's easy to wonder what if, there's no denying that The Big Bang Theory would have been a very different series without Cuoco as Penny, and who knows if it would have lasted 12 seasons without her.
An actor might be replaced in a television series due to schedule conflicts, lackluster chemistry, behind-the-scenes politics, or even death. Forgotten or not, there's drama behind the curtain. It's New York City in the early 80s. Christine Cagney is a modern single woman and a former fashion model raised in a comfortable middle-class home. Mary Beth Lacey is a no-nonsense working mom from the neighborhood. Together, they are beat-styling cops. They patrol the mean streets of Midtown Manhattan while fighting against institutional sexism in their own ranks. Cagney and Lacey had a passionate fan base that twice saved it from cancellation.
These your women? Macy and,
Lacey, sir. Cagney, Inspector.
Stars Tyne Daly and Sharon Gless dominated the lead actress Emmy category for the entire 6-year run of the series. But Gless wasn't the first actress cast as Cagney, or even the second. The series began with a TV movie starring Daly and MASH star Loretta Swit. When Swit was unavailable for the show, Meg Foster was cast in her place. But after 6 episodes, Gless took over the part. In a wide-ranging 2008 interview, series producer Barney Rosenzweig revealed the reason for Foster's departure was one of compatibility. Her performance was too similar to what Daly was creating as Lacey. He explained, "It became Lacey and Lacey." At the time of the recasting, however, Rosenzweig gave a much different rationale when interviewed by TV Guide, that viewers found Foster not feminine enough, and that together she and Daly read as lesbians, an apparently distasteful situation to viewers in 1982.
If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team.
So goes the famous opening narration of The A-Team, super producer Stephen J. Cannell's 1980s action series about a quartet of Vietnam vets who work as mercenaries in the Los Angeles underground, taking the kinds of suicide missions that no one else is bold or crazy enough to accept. The series stars 60s leading man George Peppard as Hannibal Smith, the leader of the group, Dwight Schultz as pilot Howlin' Mad Murdoch, Rocky III breakout star Mr. T is all B.A. Baracus, B.A. stands for Bad Attitude, and Battlestar Galactica star Dirk Benedict as Master of Disguise Faceman Peck. But the first time around, Faceman had a different face altogether. In the show's pilot episode, Peck is played by Love Boat star Tim Dunnigan. The issue with Dunnigan, appropriately enough, was his face. Though technically old enough to have served in Vietnam, it was decided that, in Dunnigan's own words, he was too young and too tall for the role. Benedict, who had apparently been Cannell and co-creator Frank Lupo's first choice, was cast and played the part for the rest of the series. The Law & Order franchise is no stranger to inventive solutions for temporarily unavailable cast members. Law & Order Special Victims Unit premiered in 1999, the first franchise spin-off. The series follows the dedicated detectives of the sex crimes-focused Special Victims Unit and delves further into the personal lives of its leads than the original show ever does. This is especially true for Mariska Hargitay as Detective Olivia Benson and Christopher Maloney as her volatile partner Elliot Stabler. In 2006, it was announced that Hargitay was taking a short leave of absence from the show to accommodate the final months of her pregnancy. In her place, the show brought in Connie Nielsen as Detective Danny Beck, partnering her with Stabler for a 6-episode run in the middle of Season 8. Her character was clearly meant to be temporary. Still, some fans weren't pleased by her presence. In a 2020 interview, Nielsen said she still gets Danny Beck hate mail. Tony Shalhoub's defective detective in the comedy series Monk was always socially awkward with a touch of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Various flashbacks through the seasons and a visit from his brother confirmed that his conditions were always present within him. But the moment that turned his life upside down to the point that he had to leave the San Francisco Police Department and hire a nurse to assist him was his wife's death. His wife, Trudy, was murdered by car bomb. Monk begins after Trudy's death, but the mystery surrounding it is the show's primary ongoing story, reaching from the first episode all the way to the last. In the first 2 seasons, Trudy, played by Stelina Rusic, is represented by a few silent flashbacks and photographs on Monk's mantle. Starting with Season 3's flashback-heavy episode, Mr. Monk and the Game Show, however, Trudy is played in flashbacks by Melora Hardin, an actress probably best known for playing Jan Levinson in The Office.
And I have to thank you for that other thing, too. Well, marrying me. Oh, look.
You're welcome.
Hardin would appear a few more times, most notably in the 2-part series finale where her murder is finally solved. Oddly, as the series went on, the props department used photos of both Rusic and Hardin interchangeably, and even sat them next to each other in Monk's house. Generational trauma is at the heart of David Chase's landmark series The Sopranos, the HBO mob drama that in many ways revolutionized television, opening the medium up to a more mature serialized mode of storytelling. Tony Soprano is a New Jersey mob boss who is profoundly depressed and dissatisfied with his life in ways that he can't articulate. Much of his trauma can be traced back to his mother Livia and Uncle Junior, as well as the ghost of his father, Johnny Boy. Beginning with Season 2, Tony's wayward sister Janice arrives on the scene. She's dealt with her tumultuous upbringing by moving west and embracing New Age philosophies, but can't help but get drawn back into their life. Tony and Janice aren't the only Soprano siblings, however. There's one more, a little sister who got out and stayed out, Barbara, played in a handful of episodes by Nicole Burdett. Barbara lives out of town and is rarely involved with the Soprano family business. The character is absent from seasons 3 and 4, then returns for 10 episodes in the show's last 2 seasons, this time played by Danielle DeVecchio. Even with her increased presence in the series' final run, Barbara was never a major character, and her role was by far the smallest in the family. NBC's Hannibal, based on the best-selling novels by Thomas Harris, was unlike any show on network television. Baroque, gorgeous, and gruesome, series creator Brian Fuller crafted a bloody thriller for 3 seasons that was beautiful to watch, even if you were watching through your fingers.
This is the nightmare that followed him out of his dreams.
Centered around haunted FBI profiler Will Graham and a psychiatrist, the erudite gourmet Hannibal Lecter, the series follows Graham's attempts to catch various serial killers and protect his own fragile sanity, while Lecter works to keep Graham and his FBI boss Jack Crawford from discovering that he is a brutal cannibalistic killer himself. Season 2 works in elements from Harris's sequel Hannibal, introducing meatpacking heiress Margot Verger and her sadistic, incestuous brother Mason, played by Michael Pitt. Hannibal punishes Mason for his abuse of Margot and for his general impoliteness by drugging him and forcing him to mutilate and eat his own face. In Season 3, Mason returns for revenge, paralyzed from the neck down and horribly disfigured.
I would like you to begin arrangements for Dr. Hannibal Lecter to be eaten alive.
But the actor underneath the prosthetics is not Pitt, but actor Joe Anderson, as Pitt declined to return to the role after Season 2. Premiering on NBC the same year as Hannibal with a somewhat similar premise was The Blacklist. James Spader stars as Raymond Red Reddington, a master criminal who's evaded capture for decades. Reddington turns himself into the FBI in exchange for immunity, promising to help the Bureau track down the world's most dangerous criminals, his blacklist. But of course, there's a catch. Reddington will only work with rookie profiler Elizabeth Keene. While the series has a case of the week structure, with Red and Keene bringing down one illegal operation or another, the central mystery of Reddington's true identity and his connection to Liz power the show through 10 high-intrigue seasons. A major clue to the mystery of both Red and Liz's backgrounds dropped with the introduction of Brian Dennehy's character Dominic Wilkerson in Season 3. As a former KGB agent posing as a retired systems analyst, Dom has a long, messy history with Red, one that somehow intersects with Liz's own background. After a handful of appearances through the years, Dom becomes integral to the show's ongoing storyline in Season 7, but producers were thrown a tragic curveball when Dennehy passed away in April 2020. Rather than rework the upcoming season scripts, the powers that be decided to recast the role with actor Ron Raines, who played Dom for 3 episodes in Season 8. Sometimes a show recasts a role due to the death of an actor, but other times it's due to the death of the show itself. That was the case with All Rise, the CBS courtroom drama that premiered in 2019, in which Simone Missick starred as Lola Carmichael, a former prosecutor turned Los Angeles County's newest judge.
I've been in court before. I know how this works. You think you know, but you don't. Not yet.
The series followed the ins and outs of her daily caseload, as well as the lives of the men and women who worked at the courthouse, her fellow judges, her old prosecutor colleagues, clerks, bailiffs, reporters, and more. Lola's husband, FBI agent Robin Taylor, was played for the first 2 seasons by Todd Williams. The show was canceled by CBS in May 2021. Several months later, however, it was saved from oblivion by the Oprah Winfrey Network, and a 3rd and final season aired on OWN in 2022.
Instead of asking the cop why I was being zip-tied, you asked me what I did wrong.
Season 3 took place a year after the events of Season 2, which saw Lola have a baby and lose her judgeship after defending an innocent woman from arrest. Most of the original cast returned for the final season, with the exception of Williams, who had booked the Amazon young adult series Panic. As a result, actor Christian Keyes took over as Robin for Season 3. Each season of the Breaking Bad prequel Better Call Saul begins with an enigmatic black and white sequence following the gray, paranoid life of Jimmy McGill, formerly known as New Mexico criminal lawyer Saul Goodman, now living as Cinnabon manager Gene Takovic after the explosive events of the final season of Breaking Bad. Starting in Season 3, however, those opening scenes coalesce into an ongoing story as a panic attack puts Gene in the hospital. Season 4 begins with Gene's cab ride back from the hospital, where his driver has an Albuquerque Isotopes decal on his mirror and keeps shooting glances at his passenger. Season 5 reveals that the driver, Jeff, played by Don Harvey, does indeed recognize Gene as Saul, but his motivations remain unclear. The sixth and final season foregoes the black and white scenes until the final 3 episodes, where Gene decides not to run again, but to confront Jeff and neutralize him via an old-fashioned slip-and-Jimmy con game. For these final episodes, however, Harvey was not available due to his commitment to the HBO series We Own This City. Pat Healy stepped into the role.
Jeffy, this is Mr. Takovic. Call me Gene.
Harvey's original take had a hint of menace, while Healy's was more of a sad sack divorcee, living with his mother and desperate for a taste of the Saul Goodman lifestyle. Law & Order and its spin-offs have had no shortage of cast turnover over the decades since its 1990 premiere. Part of this is baked into the premise of the show. Detectives and attorneys come in and out on a regular basis, and the departures are explained by transfer, retirement, arrest, or even death. The eras of the show come to be defined by who's running the 2 separate but equally important groups in the criminal justice system. Seasons 4 through 6 encompass Jill Hennessy's turn as Assistant District Attorney Claire Kincaid.
A search warrant? With this? You can't be serious.
Toward the end of Hennessy's run on the show, she appeared in character as Kincaid on a 1996 episode of Homicide: Life on the Street. While it's not exactly a Law & Order spin-off, it existed in the same television universe and occasionally shared characters, most memorably Richard Belzer's Detective John Munch. Filming Homicide on location in Baltimore, however, meant that Hennessy missed a few days of filming the Season 6 Law & Order episode Corpus Delicti. Luckily, she had a novel solution to this problem. Her identical twin sister Jacqueline could step in as Kincaid for a few background courtroom shots.